And although Donald Trump is no longer in office, his past anti-Asian rhetoric and use of terms like Chinese virus, Kung Flu, continues to threaten the safety of our community in New York and around the country. So many Asian Americans literally live in fear and are afraid to leave their homes because they don't know what might happen to them. Last year in September, I was proud that the House passed my resolution that denounces anti-Asian bigotry. It also included measures that would require the federal government to work with the Department of Justice to collect more data and statistics on where and how these crimes are happening, and also to work with departments like the Health Department to ensure that resources about COVID were being spread out equitably. And last month, I was really excited to see that our president, Joe Biden, signed a memorandum that contained some of my measures that I just mentioned. You know, this country has a long history of excluding Asian Americans out of fear and racism, from the Chinese Exclusion Act to Japanese Americans being incarcerated in camps, to the murder of Vincent Chin, hate crimes towards our South Asian community after 9/11, and to the most recent Muslim ban. So we have to continue to encourage everyone to do their part to put an end to these acts of hate, call it out, prevent it, stand against it. We are better than this, and this city especially, and our diversity has always made us stronger, and we cannot lose sight of that. Again, Mr. Mayor, thank you for having me here this morning. Thank you for your leadership and for using your bully pulpit to shine a light on this unacceptable racism in New York and across the country. I wish everyone good health.
Thank you so much, Congressmember. First of all, congratulations that some of the actions you were calling for have now been adopted by the President of the United States, and President Biden really is setting a positive message, which is so striking to me. Just the absence of the negative, racist voice of Donald Trump in our daily discourse is beginning the process of healing. But the residue, as you indicated, the residue of that state-sponsored hatred is still very strong, and we all have to do the best we can to fight it back, and we will fight it back. And the part you said about the solidarity from other communities, that was very powerful to me. Really glad you raised that. An attack on Asian New Yorkers is an attack on all of us. Let's be clear. We learned this so many times in history. And there's that famous, extraordinarily poignant message, that poignant passage from the Holocaust about believing if one group was being attacked, maybe it wouldn't end up affecting you. Well, guess what? What we learn from history is if one group is attacked, if one group is singled out racially, ethnically, and then you think it's just going to stop there, history tells you you're wrong. An attack on Asian Americans destroys our entire social fabric and is unacceptable. So I really appreciate you noting that a lot of other leaders of color, members of communities of all kinds, all backgrounds, have come together in solidarity with the Asian community. That means so much. And the last thing I want to say is thank you for reminding us about history. Congressmember, when you were recounting history of this country and you said the Chinese Exclusion Act, what a statement that it was called openly. And we talk about not sugarcoating. It was called the Chinese Exclusion Act. How painfully, blatantly racist can it be that something in our history was that horribly, overtly exclusionary? But that is the history we have to overcome. So I really, really appreciate your leadership, and I have faith we will get there. And now I want to talk about what we're doing here in the city, and the way to fight this hatred again is with education, is with compassion, and solidarity, as Congressmember Meng said, but it's also with consequences for those who propagate hate. I want you to hear from the leader of the Asian Hate Crimes Task Force. The NYPD put together a specific group of officers from Asian communities who speak languages and dialects from multiple communities, know the communities, listen to the communities. I want you to hear about how this extraordinary task force is fighting hate here. To speak about the leader of the task force, Deputy Inspector Stuart Luke.
Good morning. I'm Stuart Luke, Commanding Officer of the Asian Hate Crime Task Force. Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, for having me to bring awareness to an issue that's been plaguing the Asian American community for years. In light of the increase in the hate crimes against Asians that's happening not just here in New York City, not just in America, but all over the world, the NYPD has responded by creating the Asian Hate Crime Task Force. We have 25 of the best Asian American detectives in the world, speaking 11 different languages. These detectives have the background and skill set to effectively help the Asian Americans living here in New York City. These detectives are additional resources on top of the great detective squads that will already be investigating these crimes. The task force is here to help in all aspects of the investigation, and we are here to guarantee there's a strong and appropriate response to the hate that's infecting our city. The task force consists of members that come to the community to serve the community. Once again, thank you, Mayor de Blasio, and thank you for all the leaders of every single community here in New York City coming together and condemning the hate.
Thank you, Inspector. I really want to thank you. What you're doing is unprecedented and powerful. And thank you. I know you've brought together an extraordinary group of officers. The most important part is the way you're engaging the community and listening and showing people that whatever they're seeing and feeling, it will be acted on. And I want to bring in another guest now, but with a message leading into it. It is so important for people to speak up, and it's hard sometimes. We always say, in the many years we had to be worried, and we continue to be worried about the fight against terrorism. You see something, say something. Well, when it comes to hatred, if you see something, say something. Do not ever for a moment think that you shouldn't speak up. Don't think for a moment that it won't lead to action. It can and will lead to action. Don't think it's too small, because a lot of times if we find something, it leads us to other things that need to be stopped. So we want people to come forward not to feel any hesitation. And I know it's not easy. Any Asian New Yorker, any member of our community who suffered discrimination, and particularly acts of hate, and had a sense that they were in danger because of who they are, we want to know what happened. We want to know who did this so we can find them and stop them. And it's important to hear community voices in this really challenging time. One of the strongest voices in all of New York City, working with Asian communities of all kinds all over the 5 boroughs. And she's here with us today, the Executive Director of the Asian American Federation, Joanne Yu.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio, for inviting me to share this space with you this morning. At the Asian American Federation, we are always aware that we channel the voices of our community. We speak for those who can't be heard in spaces like this, like Mr. Quintana, who was on his way to work when his face was slashed, or Maggie Chung's mom, who was thrown against a pole in downtown Flushing. Since the pandemic hit us in January 2020, the Asian American community has been reeling from the second pandemic of racism. At the Federation, we set up a website to collect reports of biased incidents in our city, but there have been just over 500 reports logged. But we know that that's an undercount, so I encourage people to come forward and report their stories. These attacks are reminders of my community suffering since last January. To tell you the truth, we are scared, outraged, and devastated by the hate incidents against Asian New Yorkers, many who are frontline workers who helped anchor the city at a time when we were needed the most. Yet we continue to be violently treated as outsiders in the communities we hope to sustain. We must prioritize community safety, which is a shared value amongst all New Yorkers. And I ask our fellow New Yorkers to look out for each other. Don't stand on the sidelines, be an upstander. I invite you to stand together with us this Saturday at Foley Square at 1 p.m. to show your solidarity with the Asian American community, your fellow New Yorkers. But to keep all of us safe, we need to continue investing in safety measures for our communities by working with neighborhood anchors, like many of our member agencies, to increase access to mental health services for us, especially for those who could be a danger to themselves or to others, and connect victims to